Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brandt, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. How you doing, mate?
Pretty good today. Pretty good. And you?
Not too bad. I didn't think when we were recording this podcast last week, we would be sitting here today talking about two victories. Of course, against Manchester City, and of course, the win midweek. I have to say, James, obviously, United had a fantastic win against City yesterday, 2 days ago now. I was supposed to record this yesterday, but unfortunately, I had a little internet snafu.
Right.
Apparently, you have to actually plug the modem in, which I didn't know.
Well, who knows? That's
Oh,
wild.
it was
You
plugged
learn
in.
new things every day.
No, but it was plugged in, right? But apparently, like the extension cord was just slightly out of the plug socket, which I couldn't see. But it was fucking way under the table. So, but anyway, but yes, of course, but it was overshadowed with what happened with obviously Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho. We'll talk about that, and of course, what the up and coming fixtures, the Spurs away game, which it will be interesting to see what team Amorim picks then. But
Yes.
we will quickly talk about the City game. Obviously, wasn't the best in terms of quality in that particular derby, James. I've seen much better between those two teams. United away to City has been a rivalry where City have been the hammer and United have been the nail. And it's been a pretty painful place. I think between that and Anfield were the two most dreaded fixtures of the season for me for the last few years. And it's like, if we get out of here with anything, it'll be a draw. Hadn't won away since 2021 against any top 16, which is quite a staggering statistic. And hadn't won a game in 15 games at the Etihad. Yet I felt once Bruno equalised, that winner was there, and
Yeah.
delighted to see United get the win.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an interesting change because I think it was certainly the last time we beat City away at the Etihad in the league. Under Solskjaer a couple times. I think he did it. It was very much the type of football we're trying to move away from as a team, as a club, right? Which is, sit deep, be under pressure, hit them on the break, win in those transitions, and kind of snatch the game out from it, which we did quite well a few times under Solskjaer. But it was really interesting to see United continue against City to do what they did essentially against Arsenal. Though the result didn't pan out as well, which was to continue to play the same football that they've been playing every single game now, essentially since Amorim has come in, that has continued to grow, focus on possession, focus on gaining control of the game, focus on eliminating those open, the chances from open play. I think City had like 0.2 expected goals, not a single real chance from open play the entire game, which is quite something. I think the lowest of their entire run during this kind of rough period they're in. This was their worst game in terms of chance creation. Got to sort those set pieces out, conceding off of set pieces as per usual. But from open play, I think over the last 5-6 games, United have probably been among the best teams in the league at preventing any sort of opportunities and chances. You're not seeing those huge gaps where players are just running through right in on net anymore. And then, the chance creation, I was really encouraged in the second half. There was a spell where I think it was about 6-7 minutes of United passing the ball around, up and back, forward around, trying to get those passes in, trying to find the angle. And obviously they still need a lot of work on the attacking aspect of it, of really being more, penetrative with the play, basically. But that ended with, they got a cross into Amad Diallo, who put a header on target, which was very close. And then immediately in the sequence following that, as they retained some control, Rasmus Højlund was clearly fouled for a penalty without even the slightest bit of debate. And it was like completely just like made nothing of by the officials as if it never even happened. And it's like, what on earth? But it was really encouraging, that whole sequence, because it was probably one of the first times I've seen United control calmly 6-7 minutes of just moving the ball around and finding the attack and then making something happen with it. And it should have resulted in a penalty that would have got them equal quite a bit earlier. And it's just, I have absolutely no idea how a single human being can watch that. A player wrap their leg around the other player without making any attempt on the ball, without doing anything to actually prevent it, and not call a penalty. It's like, I don't understand. I really don't.
Do you know what, James? On that penalty, we've had 2 public comments from ex-referees.
Yeah.
One, Meg Dean. When I watch the coverage, I'm not going to say hi so I don't self-incriminate myself here, but I watch the UK feed.
Sure.
So I was able to hear Meg Dean on commentary. And when he comes in and says that you don't give it in a game like this, I don't know what that means. And see, this is the subjective rules that people are applying, referees are applying to games to referee them differently. And we'll wonder why we don't get consistency. You could also make the alternative argument that you should apply it in a game like this.
Mm-hmm.
And what does a game like this even mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Tolerance for rules. I mean, who decides that it's a game like this? City are bottom of the table since November for the most points collected of any team. Right? United are not here, or what, 13th? What is a game like this? Right? Yeah. Certainly there was no such issue whenever City got a penalty last season at Old Trafford that was incredibly soft in a game like this, right?
And no issue in the rest of the game. I mean, the fouls there was a lot of ticky-tacky fouls called against United outside of the box, like all over the place.
Kyle Walker should have been sent off in his fixture last season, James.
Yes, correct. Yes, he brought Marcus down from behind. Yeah.
Yes, and that ended up having a huge impact on the outcome of the game. He should be retroactively suspended for what he did.
Yeah.
But anyway, apparently that doesn't happen in a game like this. But then we had Dermot Gallagher also play some subjective analysis to this that I don't even understand. Well, Højlund looked like he wanted to go down. Well, one, that has nothing to do with whether he was fouled or not.
Mm-hmm.
Two, by what clinical professional assessment did you make that with, Mike? And that's none of your business, by the way. The question is, this is why players, if he'd have stood up, would he have got the penalty? No. And
100% no. That's the thing.
Determine when a player should go down and when they shouldn't. I mean, you have momentum, angular momentum versus velocity versus speed versus all these stupid variables. Like, who are you? Is it penalty or is it not? That's it.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what game it is. It doesn't matter whether you think he wanted to go down. It is irrelevant.
Yep.
Did Danny Ings want to go down? What about a game like this? That game, I was sacked after that. I mean, these are stupid subjective terms that are referee the game the way you're. I understand the subjectivity applied to the rules always, because if you refereed it by the rules, the game would be stopped every 2 seconds, right? So we have to determine what is legitimate contact. I understand there's a subjective part of that.
Yep.
But 2 determinations of a game like this, and he wanted to go down, are not part of that analysis or assessment, and you don't have to consider those factors. It's just, is it a penalty or is it not? Don't overcomplicate it, just give it.
Yep.
It's a penalty. And again, I thought, we've seen this so many times with United away from home where they don't get simple decisions. Nonetheless, thankfully, it didn't prove costly.
Yep.
And I have to say, within 90 seconds of those 2 goals going in, I was no longer concerned about the performance. I absolutely went bananas.
Yeah. Well, it was like we deserved it. And then, Bruno missed an open shot earlier as well that he should have scored. And he steps up and makes the penalty good. Then United push ahead. They get another goal. And you think, okay, Performance, first half really flat, second half better, but we deserved the win and we got the deserved result at the end of it, right? At the 100% United were the better team on balance on that day, and deserved the win there. Obviously Amad Diallo continues to be just incredible in this respect, what he is showing each and every day when he steps on a pitch and makes things happen. But I think as well, certainly you got to mention both Harry Maguire and Manuel Ugarte, because Højlund looked like he was having one of his worst days ever in football against Harry Maguire on that day. He could do absolutely nothing. And I did the stats. I looked at the stats on it, I believe, and I think Højlund got 21 touches, and of those, he lost it 14 times with Harry Maguire on him. He could do absolutely nothing the entire game. He was getting manhandled by him. And it's impressive to see because of a lot of the things that have gone with Harry Maguire in the past, but also in the present. About even still, you get people will say we can't play, in a high line, and he can't play against big teams. You can only use him in the small games and things like that. Well, there he is. He's been selected as Ruben Amorim's anchor in both the City and Arsenal game, and the only reason he didn't play in between is because he can't play back-to-backs for injury and fitness reasons. He's essentially been selected as his first choice center back in the middle of this team. Who would have thunk that? But he's very impressive, as well as, of course, Ugarte showing the reasons why he was purchased. He's been probably, since he's regularly started playing, I can't think of a better six in the league right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's definitely improved as the weeks have gone by. I think one of the things that I really liked, especially about the second goal against City, was the way the team celebrated.
Yes.
When Casemiro was left out under Ten Hag, he looked like, the last place he wanted to be was at the football club.
Yep.
All of a sudden, you see this guy coming on, this guy on the sideline with Christian Eriksen, who hasn't kicked the ball under Amorim, and the other players running on the field celebrating with him. Celebrating with Amad, Onana, celebrating. And even in that incident when Højlund with Kyle Walker, the whole team was straight in. Maguire straight up. I love that there. Straight in to Kyle Walker. Like, that was why Maguire was captain at one point.
Yep.
Because he had that presence, and now you see his confidence where, he's not afraid to be noticed. In the past when he would make mistakes. Obviously, it's a terrible place to be when you're making mistakes at Manchester United. But you just started to see little things emerge that are reflective of a closer-knit unity between the players, where they're starting to play for each other, where they're protecting each other, where, when Walker went down, there was a whole melee on how to run the length of the field. And I felt like, we've been here so many times with United, so you're reluctant to say this is, going to be a springboard. But it's an opportunity to be one. It's a win away from home. United needed to win games. It could have been so different, James, because at one point, I'm sitting there at one point thinking, I'm really worried for United. They just can't win football games. And forget about trying to qualify for Europe. How bad is this going to get? And it would have been 1 win in 5, I think, for Amorim if they hadn't have won. And then in 115 seconds, everything changes.
Yeah. Well, and you need it. They need it, right? Because you can see that they're trying to do this. And it's like Amorim said himself, right? You're going to keep suffering and keep doing it and keep learning a new thing. But certainly the win gives you the belief, gives you the encouragement, gives you the energy, the positivity, because you have to win football games. It's hard to stick with something. You don't have to win everything off the bat for sure, but it is really hard to stick with a new thing when it feels like it's not working at all. And it may be that it is, and it just takes that much time, but it's really tough to stick with it. So those wins are important, and getting the win in Europe again, I think, is really important too. I think United have climbed up out of the elimination, the qualification bracket where you got to play that extra game to qualify for the next round, which I think is really important to stay out of that. They've got, I think, 2 pretty easy games to round it out. So automatically qualifying to the next round of Europe is good. No risk of not making it to the next round. I think that's really, really important for the club. I have a strong suspicion that Europa League might be viewed as the best route, to Champions League football next year. And it probably is when you look at the competition, when you look at the strength of the opposition compared to the Premier League, which is an absolute fucking madhouse this year. I mean, we have to say, when you look at the table, it's easily the most competitive I've ever seen, the Premier League overall.
But isn't that some good opportunity to qualify for top 4, that there's really no one above you showing that ruthless consistency that leaves it open when you had 5 points off top 4?
Well, there is that, right? Like that you're not that far off of it, right? But at the same time, like, everybody's good. Bournemouth are good. Nottingham Forest are good. There's very few free games, in the league. Much fewer free games in the league than you'd think in years past. Southampton and Wolves have been the worst. They've sacked their coaches, right? Beyond that, everyone's been kind of tough. I mean, Van Nistelrooy's come in to Leicester City, which is pretty cool. By the way, I think that's really great that he got that job after after everything that's happened here, and obviously he left United on, I think, a high from United fan perspective, and with his reputation more than intact after a very good interim run for him. So that's nice to see, by the way. But yeah, there's just a lot of good teams. I mean, Tottenham, Brentford, Newcastle, all on 23 points, sitting there. Brighton just above them, Fulham just above them. There's so many teams that are good. It's like a mixture. It's like, yes, there's an opportunity. If you're good, nobody's running away, right? So you can stay within striking distance, but you have to be able to beat these teams, to climb above them, and you have to be pretty good to beat them. The quality of that, like, average or mean or whatever you'd call it, has definitely raised quite a bit, and it's going to make it difficult. But Europa, I think, does represent a pretty good opportunity there. I mean, Tottenham are probably the best team outside of United in that competition, and I think they're there for the taking as well, quite frankly. I mean, they haven't been very good recently. Worse, they're actually, they're just above United in the table by just 1 point, all things considered. So it's not like they've been better and haven't had a manager change. So yeah, but it is good to get those wins. To stay in the race on all fronts is more than important during this whole process, no doubt.
Yeah, Spurs are definitely very beatable. They'll play a different United team than what they played. That 3-0 win at Old Trafford, obviously.
Yes.
I've watched them against Rangers last week. They weren't great. You can't judge them against Southampton, obviously, the weekend, because it's not a competitive fixture at the moment. And even if Spurs still have enormous vulnerabilities, that like United, they will give you a lot of ways to win.
Yeah.
And so be interesting to see what team United picked there on Thursday for obviously the Carabao. But yes, they I mean, there's still some decent teams in that Europa League that are dangerous, but
yeah,
it's it's so hard to make any predictions with United, because predictions are obviously based on the past and what gives you a decent probability of an outcome in the future, and you just can't use the past as a predictor of the future with what you've seen in United, because it just doesn't pan out. I mean, I was asked repeatedly what did I think was going to happen in the derby, and I couldn't tell you, because no matter how bad City are, you have to realize that United are been really bad too. I mean, that first half in Pilsen was one of the worst 45 minutes I've ever seen in a game of football. And they go on, win the game, play better second half, just like they did against City. And, which will bring us to our other point a little bit, obviously, with the Marcus Rashford situation and Garnacho, because obviously the substitutions I felt in Pilsen made a big difference, even though Rashford was playing on the left. I think the Højlund central, the striker change made an enormous amount of difference. Xerxes coming off. But I think that was probably Marcus Rashford's worst game in a long, long time at United, and he's had some bad games over the last year and a half, which I think he would be the first one to admit. But we'll get to those in a bit. But nonetheless, listen, really, really good win. Again, first away win against the top six since 21, which again is a staggering statistic. To be fair to Ten Hag, he was going to a different city. A Manchester City team that he was playing against was not the Manchester City team that Ruben Amorim has been playing against, in the last month, obviously at home with Sporting and away at United. But the United team that went there in Ten Hag's first season was also much better than this United team, so it's relative. But Guardiola, we're not here to talk about City, but obviously a world-class coach, manager, but it doesn't reflect well on him that just a couple of key injuries and they've had complete collapse. And with Haaland, probably the best finisher in the world, but what we see with Haaland at City is exactly what we would have seen with Haaland at United, had he have Kane when United were being dominated and not dominating possession, not creating chances. And in many ways, it's a reflection of, United needed number 9, but United's strikers have been going through the same thing Haaland was going through. They just weren't creating chances.
Yep.
And so, in some ways, when you look at Haaland's performance on Sunday, it makes me think about Højlund in a different way, because it's like, Højlund and City's team last season, I think we're talking about a 25, 30 goal a season striker right there.
Sure.
Given the chances that he would have had in that City team. So, is it really fair to judge him in the United team that he's been in over the last, year? Because he's taken some heavy criticism. His goals in Europe have been excellent. I really like him. I think he's a top-class striker. Not world-class yet. But when we talk about going out and signing other goal-scoring strikers, is it fair to say that maybe it's not the striker that's a problem?
For sure. I think it's more than fair. I think, again, the simple fact is United have not been good at scoring goals for a few years. Even in the first season under Ten Hag, when Rashford was scoring a bunch, that was about it. There really wasn't anything beyond that. They actually scored very few goals overall besides that. And it was they've just not been a good goal scoring team for some time. And it's not really finishing. It's like we say, the chances, they don't make enough chances. They don't create enough chances.
Exactly.
When they do, they tend to score. It balances out on average. They don't really, on balance, finish worse. Like, there are games, obviously, that can stand out, but when you look at the numbers, they don't really finish worse than any other team. It's just a matter of not creating enough chances. And it's no surprise then that the most maligned players at the club are the 3 forwards who've been playing the most the last 2 seasons. Højlund has struggled for goals and gotten a lot of criticism, and Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho are out of the team right now, as of the last game.
I mean, James, I look at those Palace and West Ham games.
Yeah.
They really stand out for me. 2 away games where United really should have buried both of those teams, even in the second half against Pilsen.
Yep.
When United are, ahead in the game, at the end of the game, they break away 2, 3, 4 times, and you really should have buried the game. So there's still definitely a killer instinct missing in a football team, which is one of the reasons why someone like Amad becomes really, really important. And I don't like doing this. I don't like looking back and saying, why didn't this happen, or why didn't that happen, or why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that? But I still can't help but wonder why Amad wasn't playing under Erik ten Hag. And a United team that don't create chances, they go through a small period where they'll create chances and their XG will get elevated, and they'll give you a false sense of reality that United are a team that creates chances. But for the most part, they don't. In a team like that, you are crying out for a player that can create something out of nothing.
Yep.
Just don't understand how Amad wasn't getting into that United team, but that's neither here nor there. The way he has been such an attacking threat for United since he's playing under Amorim cannot be underestimated. And James, he dragged United back into that game on Sunday. The penalty was fantastic because he reads a back pass from Nunes. Bear in mind, he's coming into the middle again, making central runs. Second goal comes from him making a run, checking his run, bending it. The first touch over the keeper, the analysis was perfect because I didn't catch the part where he's looking at the ball. He has to then run a strike because if he keeps looking at the ball, he slows down, he misses it.
Yep.
Flicks it over the keeper, and that finish with the left foot. The composure, the quality, the confidence, the execution. I mean, that is the anatomy of an exceptionally technically gifted footballer.
For sure. Yep. And it's the only thing he can do because you take a touch there to try to settle it, to try to calm down, and the goal's no longer available. The space is gone. And every single aspect of that was just perfect. And it is unquestionable when you watch Amad Diallo play that his technical capabilities are a level above what we've seen from practically anybody at United in a long time in these attacking positions. It's really something special, and it's great that as well, he will be getting a new contract and sticking around because
Yeah.
Part of the where it really gets concerning, not to get into too much of the past, is that he was going to leave. I mean, he wasn't playing. His contract's running down. That's a player who's on their way out that could leave, and it would have been an absolute shame to have lost him. But he will stay now and is close to getting a new contract and a key part of the future.
What does City feel like losing Cole Palmer?
Probably pretty bad at this point, considering the difficulties they're going through in these positions.
He'd walk into the team right now.
Yeah, he'd be their best player, probably.
Yeah. And would be a much needed player at this moment. I don't want United to have a Cole Palmer situation with Amad Diallo.
Yep.
Because it would have been excruciating watching him go somewhere for some cut price deal and just turn the place up, and it would have been another indictment on United's recruitment, obviously. Sure. And I still think there's a lot more to come from that kid. I think that,
agreed.
As he gets rhythm, consistency, playing each week, and you can see that the ability is exceptional. There's so many things he can do. He can score goals. He can beat a player. He can create. He's still got some little minor adjustments to make about when he releases the ball and stuff like that. But that's that's nitpicking. But what a magnificent young footballer! And bear in mind, James, this is a kid that scored the last minute winner against Liverpool too. His composure. He's a very chilled kid. You see him in these interviews afterwards. He's got that personality where like his kid has ice in his veins, and he's got the type. And he doesn't strike me as a type of kid that's going to seek publicity. It's going to, you're going to have a problem with, anything other than, you're not going to have off the field issues. Who knows? Human beings are human beings, but he strikes me as a kid that is very balanced and level-headed.
Yeah, he really does, and that's the nice part is you can tell, and that's part of the performance in big games. It seems like, he's not a reactive player. He's not somebody who's going to be thrown off by anything. He's just, plays within himself in the right way, and the moments don't bother him. The pressure doesn't bother him, and then that's all goes hand in hand very often with with that kind of calm attitude and everything. So I there's little doubt in my mind because he's such a like you say, he's so level that the performances will continue, that this isn't a purple patch, that it's not a peaks and valleys type of player, but a player who, there's really no reason, in that front from his attitude, personality, and character why it won't just continue doing what he's doing pretty regularly.
United get a lot of criticism for the recruitment, but I sometimes think it goes too far, because for the longest time when we're talking about Amad Diallo, it seemed like it was impossible for anyone to match Amad Diallo without adding another 10 million to his price tag. He's 39 million. He's this.
Yep.
Funny enough, his price tag never gets mentioned anymore. It was actually 37 with a bunch of add-ons, right? So it wasn't ever actually, what people claimed. But I don't think Belated has been a terrible signing. I don't think Maguire's been a terrible signing. I mean, Dallo's have a poor season, but what he cost United 17 million. Mazraoui hasn't been a great signing. I would say Ugarte's now, showing that he's a very, very good signing. Onana, yes, he's made a couple of mistakes, but you'd have to say, if you watch other teams every week, their keepers are making mistakes too. And because the way the goalkeepers are being trained in much the same way strikers are being trained is completely skill set. So, we don't see the Peter Schmeichel anymore. The 6 foot, 3-4 comes out, ball screams, dominates his penalty area and stuff. These are almost hybrid goalkeepers in a way. So you have to evaluate them differently. And, you keep going through the team, like, the recruitment hasn't been that bad. I mean, Xerxes, 50-50, we don't know yet. You'd have to say that he hasn't lived up to, what expectations so far, but potentially could. And going through that and going, has it really been that bad? I mean, even, Martinez has been an excellent signing. And I'm going, I don't know. I just think that times they get unfairly criticized.
I think the overall problem has been not so much the individuals, because I think they have signed a lot of good individuals. Players like they brought in, like Cavani on short-term deals, were exceptional value. They were really great signings. The problem, of course, has been the lack of continuity, right? On the overall, it's more the overall plan than it is the recruitment, and it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of scouts, there's a lot of analysts, there's a lot of people that are experts at United, that are smart people, that are intelligent, that know as much as anyone else in the industry about what a good player is and all of that. But the overall plan is more important, I think, in that respect, because it's like this issue. If you sign 3 good players to play one type of football, and then you abandon that plan and sign 3 players to fit a different type of football, you end up with, you don't get 6 good players out of that. You end up with maybe 3, maybe none, because there's no continuity between it. And so it's like, it's simple math. You're almost, you buy 3 good ones and you buy 3 more good ones. You should have 6 good ones. You don't, because you bought them at opposite values and at opposite in opposite directions. And that's really been the issue, I think, from manager to manager, that it just changes so much what they want.
Yeah, and obviously you're dealing with human beings too. Having predictable outcomes of human beings is very difficult, because human behavior is the hardest thing to predict in the universe. We just don't know. Like, there's no guarantees for anything. But building teams is hard, James, especially in the modern era where you have to be very precise with FFP, PSR. I mean, City, I was looking at City's recruitment a while ago. Savinho, hasn't been a good signing. Jack Grealish, not been a good signing. Mateus Nunes, not been a good signing. Calvin Phillips wasn't a good signing. Josko Vardiol, remember Vardiol made the mistake in the cup final for Garnacho to score on Amad's second goal. He somehow tries to backheel it. I don't know why.
Yeah, he could have blocked that. Yeah,
world's most expensive defender. And I mean, I can just keep going on and on and on with players that I'm like, they've been underwhelming in terms of, so Guardiola's really having a difficulty in building another team, players that can replace De Bruyne, players that can give them, something similar to what Rodri has if he gets injured, and building it, Doku as well. I mean, I'm looking at this and going, Mahrez was a better player than Doku. I mean, Cole Palmer. I'm looking at the players that they've sold and the players that they've bought. If that was being done at United, they would get absolutely slaughtered for that, because none of those players have lived up to their billing or their expectations. None of them.
Yeah. No, agreed. It's like they made they did really well initially to build a core foundation for the City team, with the Silvas and yeah, well, exactly, right. It's funny how that happens. They're under more observation, everybody's jumping ship, and suddenly the recruitment turns to shit. It's like magic, how that works, right?
Individuals now, James, I think their system is so complex that this is one of their problems, is when you're losing, you go back to basics. But how does a City team that was not built for basics go back to basics?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kind of needs a full gutting if you think about it. A big part of it is things like, Guardiola was very reliant on Kyle Walker. Kyle Walker's not good anymore. He's really not. He's been kind of bad for quite a while now, and they relied heavily on his athleticism, his pace, and his almost unbelievable physical traits for some time to clean up, for everything. And he's been bad for quite a while. De Bruyne can't stay healthy, and has really dropped off. David Silva left, Bernardo Silva slowed down. They brought Gundogan back thinking he would solve the problems, and he's not been good since he left. And they haven't replaced what they were getting in the past out of Raheem Sterling, out of Leroy Sané, out of Højlund is a really top striker. Sergio Aguero brought a lot more to the table for Man City than he does as an all-around footballer. And is probably a much better player in my eyes anyway, just as an all-around footballer. And they've just never fixed that, the things that they've lost. And they actually have quite an old team. And and it's like, yeah, they never went about rebuilding, because it's like, how do you rebuild a City team under Pep? They've never had to deal with that, and that seems like what they're running into now is that it's burnt, and they haven't really done what they needed to actually rebuild that team, from the ground up, the way that, and every team goes through this, right? In every sport, the most dominant teams go through a point where they have to accept that they have to tear it all down and really tear it down, not just make half measures to tear it down, but really go through it. Every dominant team and franchise has gone through that in sports. And that seems to be where City is at, because their attempts to patch it with some of the transfers that they've made and soft reboot it have been absolutely terrible. Honestly, it has not worked.
James, entropy spurs no one.
Yeah.
Eventually, everything collapses. Everything goes from organization to chaos and has to be rebuilt. And every security system fails. Just eventually over time, everything just falls apart and has to be rebuilt better.
Yep.
And but for a lot of teams with City's advantage, think about how long Ferguson was able to keep that going. Think about how long Greats were able to keep recycling teams. You look at Liverpool, every couple of years they'd have a really bad season where they'd have to rebuild.
Yeah.
City were able to avoid that because of the resources. And, this is the really highly complex system, which is great when it works, but when it doesn't work, it's very difficult to bring players in and just go, okay, pick it up and play exactly the way we were playing.
Yep.
So that's a big challenge for City. Not that I particularly care, and I have to say, the win against City is always that bit much sweeter when they're not doing well.
Yeah.
United fans, we've taken some patterns of City over the years. It's been painful. It was just to watch Guardiola, 2 months ago, being the guy on camera with his arm around people, making sure all the cameras saw him, having words with other players. And, all of a sudden, Pep Guardiola looks like a deer in the headlights with a mad buck shaking his hand. And,
with more scratches on his head to show for it as well.
I don't think he's particularly handling. I find him really insincere, James. Right? When I sit there saying I'm not good enough, need to improve, or this. It just stinks of petulance to me.
I agree with you. I don't find Pep Guardiola to be like.
It also stirs contempt for me for the people that are interviewing him. Like, I'm not good enough. Whatever. It just, even with like. I don't know if you saw the Jan Åge Fjørtoft interview with Ruben Diaz, who was so disrespectful to Jan Åge Fjørtoft. And if I'd have been Fjørtoft, I'd have said, for years, you've all stood here in front of me, in front of every journalist, and taken every product, every piece of credit that's come your way. Yep. You've thrown shade at your opposition, and now you got to face us after losing a few games. And this is the type of Jan Åge Fjørtoft was a professional footballer too. Very, very nice human being too. I've had Jan on this podcast a few times. Total gentleman. And to speak with such disrespect to people, it's like, we saw this with Klopp when he was losing, the disrespect he would have for people, really condescending. And I understand losing's not nice, but how many times has Eric Ten Hag shoved in front of a camera after getting battered, losing what eight at Anfield.
Yeah.
Must have been excruciating, but he had to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, if you're going to take the credit, then you have to be able to stand up for it really sincerely to, to accept it when things aren't going right. But yeah, I don't believe it I believe it's true, but I don't believe it. I don't believe Pep believes it when he's saying that after the games and when he's saying shit like that. I don't think he does at all.
I mean, look, football's not theoretical. Yeah. You can't teach football verbally. Right. Yeah. And before you get, it's a lot of football is a heuristic, which it's about intuition, it's about learning the things you can't coach, right? How to read a game, the subtleties, patterns, quick, how, anticipate things, spaces deoccupied. That's when people get really, really good at something when it becomes natural, when you have to think about it. When it's mechanical, it's when it's still mechanistic, you haven't mastered the skill yet. So for football, coach can help you, but 90% of it is down to you. 95% of it is down to you. It's how you execute. It's all the other externalities that the coach has nothing to do with, about your genetics, about your mental side. This is always the biggest factor in everything is mental. I was watching a thing the other day about Adriano, one of the great Brazilian footballer. I remember when he went to Inter Milan, he was sensational. But, he lost his father and things fell apart for him off the field, and it destroyed his talent. And football is full with stories like this. Obviously, James, the other talking points were, of course, the exclusion of Alejandro Garnacho and Marcus Rashford. There's been people on Twitter that suggested that Alejandro Garnacho was leaking the team. I don't know if that's true or not. I really don't. What I will say is this is not something that's new. I remember Tom Cleverley getting accused of this. I remember this has been going on at United for a long, long time. And it's never been able to be stamped out. It's extremely disappointing because no one else is dealing with this in the Premier League.
Yep.
You're not having Liverpool team leaked. And I can't remember what fixture it was last season. You might be able to remember it. But who was it got the team? Was it Everton? A few days before, and made a bunch of tactical adjustments to anticipate that. I think it was 2 days before.
Yeah.
And I have to remember that. I'm not remembering that properly, but I think it was Everton. But this has been something that has been going on for a while.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't know if that's the reason why Alejandro Garnacho was left out. Obviously, 95% of the coverage has been around Marcus Rashford.
Yep.
Which to me is disappointing. United have just beaten City 2-1. This should be about Amad Diallo. It should be about Ruben Amorim. It should be about the fact that United have won an away fixture at top 6 since 21. First time they've won it, Etihad in 15 games, but instead it's all about a guy who didn't play.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame, but I guess I don't understand where we're at as a fan base and as a club when maybe it's the last 10 years, 15 years of lowering of standards of bars where people feel like as fans that they've got to jump on board, but it's not new either. The amount of abuse, criticism, and talk that United players have had, English players have had, and others have had in football in England. Obviously, there's others that at United that went through it, with guys like David Beckham and such in the past, experiencing some pretty bad things too, and many others. But it's just it's kind of never ending. We have a Ruben Amorim said that, said it really, really well, I think. Obviously, we've debated on this point here on this channel. Not so much debated as talked it through. Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos being pretty ruthless with their decision making at the club, right? For better or worse, for good or bad, whatever you stand on it, it has to be agreed they've made some pretty ruthless decision makings, right? From across the board. And the thing I think that's important to balance on that is that it has been across the board. I don't think it's been showing much favoritism. Dan Ashworth is someone they know personally. They like. They wanted him for a year. He showed up. They didn't like the job he was doing, and he was out 4 months later. He's a personal friend of Sir Dave Brailsford and Sir Jim, and they kicked him out. Okay. So they've been at least fair in that sense that, I don't think it's been unfair in their treatment of people. But Ruben Amorim said, when people are losing their jobs at the club, the standards have to be a lot higher. And that's the facts. That's how it is. And at the end of the day, that's the reason why Alejandro Garnacho and Rashford are left out. And a lot of speculation can be made that 99.9% of it is completely baseless and nonsensical. And I can tell you and anybody listening, certainly from an Ineos perspective, the only thing they really give a shit about is whether the players perform or not on the pitch, right? That's what they care about. Everything else is talk. And the reasons underlying all of it that Garnacho and Rashford have been left out is that they're not performing. And that doesn't just come down to the pitch, mind you, all right? It doesn't just come down to the 90 minutes, I should say. It's, of course, the other things that Ruben Amorim himself said. How do you train? What's your demeanor in training? What are the energy levels? How do you interact with your teammates? All of those actions that contribute to this point that you made earlier about the team and their togetherness, the spirit. Amad Diallo and Højlund had a little incident at the end of the game on Thursday, but Ruben Amorim encouraged it. They said it was a good thing. They showed fight with each other and they made up for it and they played well together and there was no issue there. And that's important. And you could see that the team spirit was very, very good against City, as you said, that they were all really pushing everyone in one direction. And so these are the things that they'll want. And that's really all that matters, for Amorim and for Ineos and all that these players are doing that. All the talk beyond that is to me just, unfortunately, a lot of it is spurred by vastly, over the top issues. The talk about Garnacho and some of the leaking things, a lot of it is spurred by personal dislike and from certain accounts and things on Twitter and stuff like that. We already know that a lot of the talk around Marcus Rashford is spurred by alternative, reasons as well. That is why the criticism always tends to extend beyond football to clothes, to hair, to things like that are just completely irrelevant to the conversation. And I promise you as well, irrelevant to Ineos. They don't give a shit what kind of clothes Marcus Rashford is wearing on his days off. These are the things that don't matter. But, both players are obviously at this point going through difficult times as footballers for one reason or another. And I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope as a fan base that recognizing that we have owners, at least the part owners, and football people and a coach who are going to uphold the standards. Not to say it's not our job to demand and ask for good football, but I think everybody could use a lot more support in general and understand that they're not going to just get by, anyway. The team is dealing with it, the manager's dealing with it, the club is dealing with, raising the bar and raising the standards, and they've shown that nobody has it's just going to exist without merit. It is a meritocracy at United at this point in time. And I think the best thing we can do is show as much support for players to get back to their best, because at the end of the day, if Rashford and Garnacho were performing really well, we would be a better football team. So why would we not want that as a fan base? That I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I don't think Garnacho's been performing that bad. I think, I think someone showed me a stat a week or so ago that his stats were better than Mbappe's this season. He's still a young kid, James.
Yeah.
And one thing, I hear a lot of compare and contrasts with, Beckham and this and that. But one of the things that is different about today is social media. Social media
correct.
has completely changed everything. It's completely changed our body politic, our culture, our societal norms. It's had such a radical impact on the human brain, on our community, and the human brain was not designed to deal with a deluge, a crescendo of just millions of people saying
Mm.
you're shit. I mean, I'm seeing things on social media that players should die, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're a great player and you can somehow ignore all that, you have to remember that the family members of these people are reading this, their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters. This is excruciating. And the mental toll that that has on players, because they're human, is, incalculable. And we can't, you know, I remember in the 90s. Oh, I don't like what the papers are saying. Well, don't buy them. Okay, well, you could ignore that, but you simply cannot do that in a digital world
Yep.
and ignore uh, the deluge of abuse that's being sent your way. And we saw this with Garnacho a couple of weeks ago when he scored and he didn't want to celebrate because criticism was getting to him. He's a kid. He's a human being. You
Yeah.
know, it seems when you go through life, your own imperfections humble you. They You learn repeatedly from your mistakes, from your own bad behavior, and from life showing that you know it's complicated. I mean, when I was in the midst of my depression and then you self-medicate, I could take a week off work and hide. These lads can't. I could lie in my bed for a few days and not face the world. These guys can't. They have
Yep.
to be training every day, peak performance. They have to eat right, sleep right, but that's very hard to do when mentally you're in a different place because I've used this metaphor many times in the past. There's the car and the driver. It doesn't
Yep.
matter how good the car is if the driver is inebriated, right? Because if the driver hits a wall, none of these other advantages, technical advantages, matter.
Yep.
So you have to get the driver right and what's in here. And we are highly, highly susceptible to environmental changes.
Yep.
Our physiology is not the same as someone else's, or our genetics are not the same, or our upbringing is not the same. The human brain is the most complex instrument in the universe.
Yep.
And in relation to Marcus Rashford, I don't know how it feels to live in a city where it feels like the whole world's on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And I know if you're an average guy, just like me, you, everyone else, it's hard to ask a starving man to feel empathy for a guy with a banquet. I understand
Yep.
that. I'm not asking you to feel empathy for the fact that he has a lot to eat. I'm asking you for the fact that he can only eat the same amount as you. After that, your belly's full. Life
Yep.
outside of that, I'm saying that is no different to yours.
Yep.
And no matter how much money you make, it does not buy happiness. It does not insulate you from all the problems that happen on the outside. And these are obviously major factors on how a human being goes about their job.
Yeah. For sure. And it is definitely that difficult to deal with for people. And again, I do wish there was more empathy. I mean, people use examples. We've talked about Harry Maguire on the show, and that's why I brought him up earlier as well about where he was at 2 years ago. And everybody's different. Harry Maguire dealt with it differently than some players have dealt with these types of things in the past. But it also goes to show how much of the criticism was wrong, was incorrect, was overstated. There's criticism and there's valid things and such, but there was stuff that was going way over the top. I will not ever forget 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, in the United States, going to a preseason game and hearing Harry Maguire get booed. Unfucking believable. I have no clue how that is possible in the United States. It's just unbelievable that
But to be fair, they're copying United fans from
correct. Well, that's what I mean. And he was getting booed for England, where he's been exceptional his whole career. Yeah. It's like this is where these narratives and things can spiral, and it's the same story we see on other players. He was getting blamed for the money, blamed for his cost, blamed for his wages, blamed for the captaincy, blamed for all sorts of things. And it's like it gets out of control. It gets out of control. And I wish we could do better on that, because I don't think it helps. I don't think it helps anybody at the end of the day.
and to be fair to human beings, you're calculating your impact on a micro, not a macro basis, right?
Yep.
There may be millions of people saying this. I'm just responsible for me.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that, excuse me, the accumulation of all of this has such a devastating effect. And you bring up a good point about Maguire, because I've been no angel myself in the past. And I've looked at some of the things that I put online where I'm like, this is embarrassing, right?
Yep.
And so I think it might have been Maguire really where that was the point where I went, this is not right.
Yeah.
Like trying to be funny by putting snidey comments and stuff, just because whenever you see the impact of that on a human being and the actual
Yep.
cash value of that type of persistent abuse, again, it humbles you.
Yep.
And not just on the player, but on the extended family.
Yep.
And you think to yourself, yeah, this is unacceptable.
Yep.
And I understand United have a different perspective on this, James. They're a sporting institution, and this is an elite sporting institution. They can't carry this forever.
For sure.
At some point, the individual has agency and has to decide, can I be happy here? Yep. Can I be happy in this environment? And sometimes when you're in an environment, James, it's bigger than a change of manager because it's in the walls. People have been on this treadmill for longer than others, and their fatigue level with it is completely different. Yep. My own personal view is Marcus should leave Manchester United because I don't see any way he can get in the right mental state where you're going to have that much of an environmental change where it's going to change him in such a way. I don't know what's going on with him. And this is important to say because I want to get to another point after this. We're not like best friends. I'm not right here. I haven't had him on my podcast. I'm not releasing interviews with him. I mean, this is some of the stuff that gets thrown at me over this is outrageous. It's just I'm a little bit more informed on some things in relation to that than I am on other things. And so it changes your whole perspective on it.
Yep.
That being said, that doesn't mean Marcus Rashford doesn't have a responsibility to play at a particular level to stay in the Manchester United team. If he isn't, I'm not going to argue that he should be playing. I think you get him in the right space, the right place. He is a fantastic striker, but he's not there right now.
Yep.
He's 27. And James, as I said before, there's a statue outside Old Trafford to a 27-year-old. He was a genius. I'm not comparing them as players, but he also had difficulties managing the expectation and the off the field activities. I'm not saying again they're completely analogous. I'm just saying that playing for Manchester United is a very, very difficult thing for any young lad, and to remain within disciplinary parameters that are very difficult for any 20-year-old to live, especially if you've got all this money and you're made to live like a monk. That's hard to do.
Yeah, agreed.
For some it's not.
It for sure, and it is different for everybody. But yeah, and look, at the end of the day, with all of this, it's of course the responsibility of the individuals, and to get themselves up to the level that they need to be successful. And I do sadly agree with the assessment that just due to the nature of everything that's gone on, it's probably in Marcus's best interest to move on from the football club, moving forward, because I don't, when I look at what goes on, the constant deluge of stuff that goes on, I don't see a way back from it. I mean, even just last week, I think it was, he scored 2 goals in a game, and the entire week it was still him in the headlines and social media with abuse and criticism. It goes far beyond the performances at this point, where a lot of people's minds have been made up, and that's it. And there's nothing that's going to change that. And I think that, when you can't change the environment, you go to a different environment, because there's no sense in being in a situation that is that toxic for an individual. It makes it very hard to get out. It makes it very hard to adjust. It makes it very hard to deal with it. And it's probably for the best for everybody. And sometimes it's just that way. A new place, a new start, a new environment works for everybody. And maybe he'll see it that way. Maybe his people will see it that way. Maybe the club will see it that way. And maybe it'll go that way. Maybe not. Maybe over the next month and a half under Ruben Amorim, it'll all improve and go better, and things will fix up. But I guess we will see on that front.
Just a final point on that. When we talk
Yeah.
about Ineos, Manchester United, obviously, as we've said, they're an elite sporting institution. They can't carry you indefinitely if there's impediments to your performance. But one thing about Ineos that Ratcliffe has made clear from day one is he recognises how important the environment is for anyone.
Yes.
This is where you don't necessarily need a background in football to understand how important sports psychology is. This is something they will have be prevalent in all their other sports. There's no doubt that'll be big in cycling and other aspects. So, I think they will, because the question for Manchester United is what happens when someone is the next Marcus Rashford, because undoubtedly, if Rashford was to leave, someone else will take on the mantle of being the boogeyman, as it has always been.
Yep.
We've seen this time and time again with United players where, we could talk about Alexis Sanchez, we could talk about Lukaku, we could talk about Pogba, we could talk about Maguire, and there's just player after player after player that has just felt like the world is on their shoulders mentally and they just need to get out. This has been going on from Di Maria, really, where the environment has not been right.
Yep.
So the question is, what if it's Amad next year? That seems unthinkable. Yeah. But it seemed unthinkable when Rashford was scoring 30 goals that he would be, just a few months later being absolutely, eviscerated in the villain. What if it's Amad and he needs the support of an institution that can protect him? Because one of the things where United really went wrong on this, James, and I'll be straight up, when we're talking about Beckham, when Beckham came back from the 98 World Cup, United protected him, right? They closed ranks and they protected him. When Rashford and Sancho came back from the Euros after missing the penalties, they were not protected.
Yep.
And of course, Rashford was not protected after all the attacks over, his food drive during COVID. And there's other things that are not my story to tell, but that would have made it very difficult for a human being to succeed. The football club has to make sure these types of things never happen again.
Yep.
Because you simply cannot get the best out of any human being in an environment like that.
Agreed. Yeah. And that really is the job at the end of the day. And the only shame of it, if it ends this way, is we won't know for a while if that's the case, because the next time things turn down a little bit, how easy it is to turn on anybody.
So many angles. Look at Brandon Williams.
Yeah.
For example, a young kid that had tremendous talent, was playing in a Europa League semi-final. United were certain he was the successor at fullback. Starts getting caught taking nitrous oxide off the pitch, having other problems. United wanted to get him away to Ipswich. Ipswich were going to go on a pre-season tour to Vegas after getting promoted and decided they were not going to bring him because of issues off the field. These are all publicized issues, so I'm not saying anything that has not been already out there.
Yep.
But he gets a big contract, and all of a sudden, it's very, very difficult to be disciplined enough to not let. Imagine being given 80 grand a week at 20 years of age, and then saying you can't go out with girls, you can't go out and do this, you can't. It must make that even. It must intensify the temptation. You have to be surrounded by very good, strong people. But even then, so much depends upon your priors mentally, your genetics, your how you were socially conditioned. There's just so many things that goes into it that we just don't. The whole discipline of psychiatry is littered with the replication crisis. More than 50% of the papers that have been written in psychology are not replicable because human behavior is extremely unpredictable and just one variable completely changes it. They've done studies on politics where people will one day answer questions with a liberal leaning, and the next day answer questions with a conservative leaning, all depending on the experience they had before they walked in the door.
Yep.
It's
much.
just anyway. So,
and there's another high profile case that the club bears some responsibility on too that we won't get into for other reasons. That was not that long ago too. But I think definitely Ineos, the biggest task and probably the toughest task is to fix the environment, because there's been good players and good coaches who've walked through that door. You can get those people. The environment is a bigger problem. Fixing it is the biggest task, and all of that will fail in a bad environment. It's just true of any business, of any relationship, of anything. The environment is key, and it is king to the whole thing. And I hope they can fix it, because there will be more things like this if they don't. And it'll be someone you like next time. Whether if you didn't like Rashford before, it'll be someone you like next time. I guarantee it. Always will be.
Doing this, by the way, they're not showing up going, I'm doing this because I don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm not putting in the effort. What you're seeing is a human being in a lot of pain. And if you haven't gone through this in life, I'm glad you haven't, and I hope you never do. But what you're going to do, if you ever unfortunately find yourself in a position where there's no synchronicity between your brain and your body, and you're in a dark place, you lose energy, you lose, you lose all your stimulation, you lose all your motivation, you lose your adrenaline, everything goes where you just don't have the desire to move, and you don't know why, and you don't know how to fix it. What worries me in situations like that, James, is that's when human beings start to turn to vices like, gambling, alcohol, drugs, sex, things that provide an immediate dopamine rush, so that you start to get adrenaline back, you start to get things back, but it's temporary. I don't know if any of those things are happening, by the way. I'm just saying that those are not a million miles away when you're stuck in that place too long. And I speak from personal experience. So another reason why I think when it comes to the psychological aspect, as humans, we should all take a step back and go, it's not really a moral feeling or a judgment. That's a medical issue to me. So anyone in that situation, I wish nothing but the best for. Okay, Mary, anything else before we go? We'll be back, obviously, one more before Santa Claus arrives.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. But yes, but nothing else today. That should do it.
Okay, hopefully Santa Claus brings you a dishwasher, or else I'm going to be calling for child labor laws in Colorado. So with we stupid kids. This time next year we'll have Bono singing a song for your kids. Do they know it's Christmas time? Before you go, what did the stamp say to the envelope?
Oh boy.
Check on me, I'm going places.
Uh-oh. Just a great place to lose you. So we're going to end it there. We'll see you all later. Thanks for watching.